So, I guess I'll do this first time vlogging. Alright, I feel embarrassed about the word vlogging, but that's what I'm doing right now. And actually, there's no problem, is there? So, that's what I'm doing in the street. And, yeah, so today I just came back from the physics building in Leipzig for the first time at the university. I was in a class for quantum optics, a master's class. I'm not registered as a student. I finished my master's 2 years ago. It was an interesting experience. Actually, I'm gonna walk this way. It felt like a very stifled environment. Let me put on my backpack real quick. It was really interesting to kind of come back to that environment after some years of not being in there. I originally left physics because it wasn't making me happy, like maybe partially the subject itself, because it tends itself to kind of lonely, independent work, but there's also a lot of elitism about it. People are, out there trying to prove themselves that they're qualified enough, excellent enough, and it makes for a weird vibe. And also, I guess the power structures are kind of weird because you're very, you're very subject to kind of the arbitrary thoughts that someone else, especially your professor, thinks, whether you're a student or whether you're working in a research group. You sort of have to maintain the relationship with your professor, and your professor might be genuinely good, or your professor might, in subtle ways, or maybe not so subtle, but usually more in subtle ways, not really treat you well. Yeah. So what did I notice today that kind of threw me off? So it wasn't exactly what I expected. I was expecting kind of a class on quantum optics, which I'm very interested in because I think normal quantum mechanics doesn't address very much how to deal with light. It only talks about, electrons and protons and whatever. And especially with light in position space and stuff, a lot of it kind of gets swept under the rug and you don't learn it in the foundations. And I want to know, is there a separate set of postulates from which quantum optics is derived? What are the assumptions? How does it work? What are the limitations? I guess obviously you can't really do position space, or I say obviously, but that's probably what a lot of people say, but I don't know it for myself that well. If it just hasn't been done much, or if it's not possible by some proven way, and what the issues are exactly. Right. Now, for the interesting part about today was that the lecturer, I had suspicions that he was somewhat manipulative. Low battery. And it's not really something that I wouldn't even think that way as a student, really, because I just put all the responsibility on myself as a student. I ask myself only if I'm good enough. I don't say, well, the system isn't right or whatever, because it's not a very successful way to be a student. You're not going to get far at all. But now I have a little bit more freedom. And look, maybe I'm not saying it can be construed as a very strong thing, but what I noticed was that, and it's also not necessarily a huge deal, but I felt like the professor was doing things in his interest and framing it as being in the interest of the students, and basically putting the onus on them, which was really interesting, but with a smile and with an apparently gracious demeanor, because the class was actually just called quantum optics, and it didn't require any introduction to quantum optics. And if you really want to get into quantum optics as a student, I mean, probably, especially if you want to research it, probably you need a foundation in it. And one of the best things is really just to learn actually, the foundations of quantum optics, how the course actually, or how the theory actually works, and just some of the basics. But this was one of those classes that you find, especially in Germany, where you have to make a presentation on what the professor is doing for his research topic, or what one of the people in the group is doing for their research topic. I find it somewhat lazy, because actually it's the easiest thing to do as a professor. Just make the content of the course something that you already work with intimately every day, so that it can potentially inspire something relevant to your research. So basically it's useful for your research, and B, you don't have to do much work because it's directly what you work with already, and so you're not there like trying to figure out what the textbook is saying. You own the course basically, and you are already the authority. So but the interesting thing was that he then said that somehow this was the best thing for the students, because then you just get thrown into the research and you figure yourself out, you figure things out, and that's the best way, because it's you get thrown into the practice of it. Now that is kind of like it's not the first time that I've heard that said, and I've also heard it said in good faith. And there is some truth to that type of thing, but the issue is also, let's say that rather than learning quantum optics, you learn specifically the modulation of current in some Rydberg atom system, whatever it is. What you've learned is good for that research group specifically. And then when you transition to another group and the person who actually has the foundations of the subject is going to be more well equipped to fully understand what's going on than somebody who just stumbled into one very specific subject or another. But I don't think that, I think that it was just somewhat, I have a suspicion about it, because it just happens to be the easiest thing to do as the professor. Where does the problem lie? Is it in the professor choosing the easy thing, or is it in the system requiring too much from professors in order to compete in this academic system? I don't care. Blame is such a non-existent thing. When somebody gets shot, do guns shoot people or do people shoot people? It's not even both, I guess, right? Like, my thoughts are, I feel like they're coherent to me, but not necessarily presentable to others, but at the moment, but that's okay. Basically, that's all I wanted to say, though. I found it interesting, and not only that, but I felt immediately stifled when I was in that building. I mean, one thing is that I wasn't supposed to be there, like, I'm not a student, so I was a little scared about that, but I feel like very small things get judged very harshly at times in an academic context. Like one little thing about, like, there was this Indian student who, I don't know, he didn't see the email that was sent out for the course, and somehow it was just a weird situation from the get-go about, like, well, I sent the email out to everyone, you should have received it, and I don't know, just like acting noticeable or weird in a certain way can, like, quickly bring suspicions. And so much of what's going on emotionally is subdued, and people don't talk, you know. The entire class, basically, it was just the professor talking, and in terms of emotions, there was really nothing. There was no, you know, it's all your fault type of thing. That's kind of what it's a very weird environment. But the next two lectures actually are relevant to what I care about. The topics that the students are presenting honestly are of no interest to me, and thank goodness I can just say that personally I don't care. I don't give a fuck about your, you know, modulation of current in Bose-Einstein condensate systems with fucking whatever effect. Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of how things went today, and I like to make these observations because in some sense understanding the phenomena, actually I'm going to keep talking because I want to, understanding the phenomena that drive how you feel in a situation is so important and interesting. Yeah, like, what do I want to say exactly? Like, I was so stifled there. That was crazy. I feel like everybody has to be very proper, or somehow it's such a unforgiving or mistake criticizing situation, like, compared to everything. Like, even like when I was working as a data scientist, okay, it was in Florida and not at a very technical company, and that had a lot to do with it, but still there was, you know, pressure, and it was nothing like here. Like, there I could, like, ask questions and reach out to people and be like, I don't get it, but I'm gonna figure it out and it's gonna be okay, you know, like, and I can speak on a human level to people. In that physics seminar, wow, like, the judgment that was just going on, like, and the inability to, the feeling of, if you give emotional feedback, that it's just so unwanted. Wow. That is just, like, you know, messy and inappropriate somehow. The thing is, although messy and inappropriate, it can still be very much relevant. So relevant that I think that a lot of the emotional situation in physics causes shit research. Like, the inability to act outside of some very proper rules or proper way of being, or not exposing unstable parts of yourself or doubts, or causes huge mental health issues in graduate students, and also not an environment where you can just, for example, say to another person that I don't get it, like that seems like it's useless, you know, your work is useless or whatever. There's a few people who maybe can do it, maybe they're already professors, or maybe they have a certain charisma or a certain attitude that can fit. But if you don't fit into a certain type of box, and if you're a student who's dependent on people, you might just be out. And even if you wouldn't be out, you don't know that you wouldn't be, because the way that the system works, you feel it like it's a within possibility. So wow, this is such a beautiful path right here, like especially during the fall. Wow, it's so nice. Okay, maybe I'll go actually to Peek in Kloppenburg in the city center and get a yellow shirt, and then maybe I can take some pictures while the fall leaves are there, because Amin pointed out correctly that would be a really nice kind of background for a yellow shirt. We'll see. But anyway, this was just an interesting thing. Basically, it was about the psychology of the physics building. Say it at least that way. And I don't feel actually that I've completely understood it, and it still bugs me, and I still feel I don't feel good. Like I feel pent up. I feel like I have to be very controlled of myself in order to somehow be I don't know, within line or something like that. Very weird. And this is what I was missing. It was at NYU as well, so not just a German thing. Like LaGuardia High School was a very, like, people were very didn't give a fuck, you know, like they weren't taking themselves so seriously, and like they just kind of did shit, and it was artsy, and yeah, of course every group may have some issues or whatever, but an environment where you could feel comfortable being flawed. And university is just, people put all the blame on themselves, I feel. I don't know. I feel like at this point I'm kind of looking for a problem because I don't feel good as a result of being in that building. But it's gonna be one day a week for me, and that's kind of fine. So yeah, I just have to be, true to myself, and actually the rest of the week is just me. And in the end, I don't need these people, I don't have to play the game. And if, there are consequences, then it feels weird. But I can actually just, cut ties, or just have things not work out properly, or say the things that I want to say. The hardest things are saying, like, Professor, I feel like you're being manipulative in that way, like some shit like that you can, like, or like that, to bring up stuff like that causes a problem, so to say. Yeah. Anyway, just interesting beginnings of thoughts. Once again, I don't have a clear mind at the moment to fully understand what went on. Oh, yesterday I had a great therapy session. Although I feel like it was completely because of me and completely not because of my therapist. Because she was actually saying, oh, so you have this problem. And I was like, no. And then I explained it and she's like, oh, so you have this problem. I was like, no. I was like, bitch, like, and then she was like, oh, it's because of your dad. I'm like, yeah, I mean, probably, I don't know. But I was like, I was unsatisfied. It was a great session because I took control and I was like, no. Even though she hadn't asked the question, she had just stated that you this and that, you know? And, yeah, that was weird, but it resulted in me in the end bringing out some truths which were very interesting to me. But in some ways I'd like a therapist who, you know, I'm not convinced that in every circumstance I can do that I can always catch that she's just making conclusions before she's justified to. I might not always catch it. I might just buy into it. But psychology is very complicated, and I don't want to do that. And I don't think that she's necessarily... I don't know what the deal is why she jumps to conclusions. Of course, there are weird things about being a psychologist where, you know, you may be afraid to stop having something to say because if the conversation isn't going, then people aren't gonna pay anymore, of course. And they might make a negative comment about it, or, you know, if you don't provide a solution or a an answer that, like, yeah, that people could think that there wasn't utility in it, or they couldn't find the utility in it. Although maybe there would be utility, but it wouldn't be due to the therapist or something like that. So there are weird motivation systems underlying therapy for therapists. And I don't know, that's just something to think about. I thought about maybe continuing with this therapist on the side while I actually look for a different therapist, although that would obviously add expense. But then again, I'm doing all right now, and to spend money to find a therapist that fits what I want, or at least to explore the pool of what's available and discover for myself what actually makes a good therapist, what are the criteria that I want, and how do I find that, and do I prefer young or old and stuff like that. Yeah, I think that would be interesting. So, yeah. Anyway, that's all, folks. I'm sure that this video is not interesting to people besides myself, but I'm going to start off with just making this be an outlet for my own communication. And, you know, in the future I may tailor it to fit both needs, but, you know, I mean, I'm not convinced that I'm ever going to make an income from YouTube. And I'm not convinced it's going to turn into anything. So if I can get something out of it personally, that's already good. Bye-bye.